Are you angry that the federal government is involved in affecting your decisions about what you do with your body, recreationally or just to take care of your health? Does it make you sick, basically, that the federal government gets to say whether you can take something which is a drug or not, and that the federal government gets to approve it and can prevent you from buying drugs that you think would be helpful to yourself? Think of all the cancer people who sign up to take those tests where they don't even know if they're getting a real drug. They have a 50% chance of getting a placebo, and these are people that are desperate to do it. They're so sick. Anyway, the federal government has gotten involved in the entire medical business, because the drug business is part of the medical business. It's something that we do with our bodies, and it started in 1906 with the creation of the FDA. And this was done without any constitutional basis. It might surprise you to know that the founders would be horrified, just like you, if they knew that the federal government was sticking its nose into this, because all the federal government has done has complicated the whole thing, made it more expensive, and has prevented citizens from getting what they want. Remember, in the Revolution, one of the things that they fought the British for was for the natural right to pursue happiness. Well, one of the ways some people pursue happiness, and should have every right to do it, is taking drugs. If they can't take good care of themselves when they're doing it, that's their problem. That's not the government's problem. We are supposed to be free people who make our own decisions about our bodies. Anyway, there's been basically three real developments in improving health from the perspective of the medical profession, medical and pharmaceutical profession, basically since the 20th century. Before the 20th century, what they did was really barbaric. They took people's blood. They actually believed that stuff like that was helpful. It used to be prior to then, it was more dangerous if you had money and went to a doctor than if you didn't. But there have been three real improvements. Surgical techniques. In fact, they can do surgery, and the machinery involved in it. They can do surgery on hearts that would have been impossible without the machinery that goes along with that. Anyway, that's one thing. Surgery techniques and the machinery that goes with it. Anesthesia. Can you imagine what it's like to have surgery without anesthesia? That's the way it was until relatively recently. Modern anesthesiologists have all sorts of ways of dealing with it, but they didn't have any of that stuff. It was a big development when they just started using ether. But now they have all sorts of things they can do. Anyway, the development of anesthesia as a profession, and the developments in surgery and the technology that goes along with it, and the other thing, the biggest single development that has improved our health from as far as medical stuff helping our health goes, is the pharmaceutical industry. And the pharmaceutical industry is burdened by having to comply with all the nonsense imposed on them by the FDA. The FDA was created in 1906 to regulate everything having to do with our health. Everything we put in our bodies, all the food and drugs. And bear in mind, they knew how unconstitutional it was to create it, because at the very same time that they were creating the FDA, they were trying to get prohibition passed, alcohol prohibition, to just regulate just that one thing, alcohol, the way they claim they can regulate everything. And they knew they needed a constitutional amendment to do it. And they did it, and the country hated it. And it caused massive increases in crime, because that's what having prohibitions do. Prohibition is what's called a contraband law, where something is declared illegal to sell or to buy. That's what a contraband law is. And prohibition turned alcohol into a contraband substance. any form of alcohol. And of course, people hated it. And because people hated it, or because people hated the law, their desires didn't change. An entire industry grew up, and the entire industry was criminal by definition, because it was criminalized by the criminalization of that industry by prohibition. And that's exactly what happens anytime any substance is forbidden to be bought or sold by the government. It creates black markets. And the bigger the demand, the bigger the market. And because it's all criminal, the people involved on the selling side are criminals. And the nature of criminality is, once you let criminals control a business, then it becomes dominated inherently by the worst sociopaths, because they're the only one. The worst sociopaths are the ones that are willing to do absolutely anything to succeed. And once legal people are forbidden from a business, only criminals are allowed to sell it. And any of the good criminals get wiped out by the bad criminals. That's what happens when you criminalize anything. And that's what's so terrible about prohibition-type laws. It creates its own problems the cure is worse than the disease. Anyway, what the FDA and all of these other alphabet soup agencies involved in the health business in America do is they criminalize anything that they don't approve. And of course, Medicare, the creation of Medicare in the 1960s added a whole additional dimension where the money to pay for the health care of people covered by by Medicare all came from the government. So the government became intimately involved in the whole thing. They could dictate prices, and it ended because such a large percentage of the market was for people over 65 covered by Medicare. It affected the whole health industry. And then on top of that came Obamacare. Now, Obamacare was passed based on lies. Barack Obama stood there and he lied and said, if you like your doctor, you can keep your doctor. If you like your health insurance, you can keep your health insurance. The whole purpose of Obamacare was to eliminate the entire actual health insurance market. Insurance is a unique product. It's where a company sells something based on the actuarial risk that they're going to have to pay off. And they've got brilliant mathematicians who figure out these things. They can come up with the prices. It's a way of pricing risk. And what Obamacare did was it made it illegal for insurance companies to sell actual insurance based on actuarial concepts, because their premiums were dictated by the government. And what this ends up doing is it ends up requiring everyone to pay the highest amount that the sickest people would otherwise pay. That's what Obamacare did. That's why the health insurers were all in on it, because first of all, there was a mandate. Everyone had to buy it. It was the first time a product was guaranteed to be sold by the seller, because everybody in the country had no choice but to buy it. If you sold cars and everybody could be forced to buy your car, wouldn't you love that? That's why all the health insurance companies were all in for it. And of course, they had to take the government on as a partner, but it was a no-lose proposition for them. However, they really stopped being insurance companies at all. They were just a middleman in a money laundering scheme in which taxpayer money went into it, it got laundered, and it ended up going to a combination of healthcare providers and the so-called health insurance business, and huge bureaucracies that were created to deal with the problems that this created in the market. So you've got huge numbers, hundreds of thousands of people in very expensive bureaucracies that are getting paid by the money generated by this crazy idea, without any improvement in anyone's health. That's what Obamacare does. And that's what happens when the government gets involved in a market. And right now, the government can dictate any drug that you take or prevent you from taking anything. You have to ask permission if you're really sick to even participate in one of these special tests. And the entire pharmaceutical business has been transformed. All of the healthcare providing business, pharmacies, doctors, they're just bureaucrats filling out forms and checking boxes. They don't even talk to you when you go to the doctor because he can't. He's got all these boxes he has to fill out. And that's what happens when the government gets involved. And it doesn't improve anyone's health. Everyone's going to end up buying the same things that they would otherwise buy and there are many things that are no longer even available. And the government hasn't improved a single thing by getting involved in any of that. And it's all completely unconstitutional. There's nothing in the Constitution that permits any of that. Thank you. I'm Cliff Ribner. And if you are interested in what I have to say, follow me